Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hopefully, everyone is doing well here. As I said to you guys yesterday, I am on retreat today, so I did want to leave you guys a very short lesson in regards to pretty much where we left off yesterday. Section 3, as hopefully you guys read by now, is going to take a break from following Washington around on the battlefield and talk about some of the other parts of the war. And yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about Valley Forge. All right, Washington's really his greatest test, okay, during the war. And it wasn't a battle, but rather the challenge of keeping the army together during certainly such a critical point here. So, more soldiers, as we said yesterday, die in the Battle of Valley, not the battle, but die at Valley Forge than any other battle in the American Revolution. So, I always find that statistic to be so important. But today, and what you're going to do for classwork today, and the two assignments that I've left you, is to analyze two other groups who wound up playing a part in the American Revolution. And the first group to talk about are women. Okay, women did play a role here in the colonies in the newly formed United States during the American Revolution. I think it's first and foremost important to recognize that. Um, with more and more men as the years go by, begin to enlist in the military, women started to take on more prominent roles in society, starting at home. Okay, with husbands and sons away fighting off in the war, women were asked to step up. All right, to not only deal with the things that we have seen colonial women do, like cooking and cleaning and childcare, but now tending to farms, now running stores and businesses in cities, you name it, anything men were doing without that male presence at home, women were expected to do it. So there is that conversation that I think is important and something that we will continue to talk about as we move to the 19th century, where during times of war, women were asked to step up to the plate. And then after the war, it was kind of like, well, let's go back to normal. But finally, people will say, well, that's not normal. All right, women should have opportunities to own businesses and do what they want to do. So we are getting into later on in the year the women's rights movement. We're far away from that, but right now it is good to see that women were starting to play a part off the battlefield. And again, that's a lot of stress, that's a lot of pressure, and everything that was going on there. Now, as far as, well, what if you didn't necessarily have a family? You were the wife of a soldier who enlisted. A number of wives did travel with the army. All right, they would be put into a separate camp. Okay, but these women would basically tend to the camp needs. Okay, whether it be cooking or cleaning, basically serving as nurses, bringing water to soldiers during battles. These were all be things that women typically did. So a lot of them did wind up traveling in camps. They would have their children. If they did have children and they didn't want to stay home, they could obviously be provided that opportunity. There are not. Um, there were laws here in the colonies, and for Washington, he did not permit women to enlist. So we do not have any women who are fighting in the Continental Army. Deborah Sampson is one woman that we do know who had basically disguised herself as a man and wanted to fight. Okay, so she enlisted. She put a bunch of dirt on her face and, had her hair cut and whatever else. But she believed in the revolutionary cause. Okay, and probably the most famous woman to be featured in the Revolution is the one pictured here to the right, whose name is Molly Pitcher, as the story goes, but her birth name was Mary Ludwig Hayes Macaulay, so a long name, Molly. And the reason for that was that she had been remarried after the death of her first husband. And as the story goes, at the Battle of Monmouth in 1778, Mary was traveling with the army. Her husband was fighting in battle, and her job in August of 1778 was to bring water to soldiers. And as the story goes, one of the cannons being operated by the Continental Army, a soldier was injured. And essentially, what Mary's going to do is drop her pitcher of water and go and help to attend to working the cannon so that it was still used in the course of the battle. And this painting depicts Molly Pitcher. And kind of look at the picture, the painting, the artist to convey, with the explosions in the background. Okay, she's standing there very brave. So this is very much a direct message to say, hey, women can do the same thing as men. As this painting became more and more famous by the time of the 19th century. So because of this, her nickname is Molly Pitcher, all right, because she was carrying pitchers of water. And if you actually look, not to zoom in here, there is a bucket of water there, or a pitcher of water, that you can see. So sorry for kind of moving this around a little bit, but I can't probably not going to get it back to center here. All right, so women certainly played a role in the war, and as you go to read today, there are two other women who are referenced, and one of which we've already spoken about, that you'll see. So again, that's on your worksheet. The other group that I want to shed light in today goes along specifically with your worksheet, obviously. But another group who does play a part in the war are African Americans. Now, as we've said repeatedly, 20% of the colonial population at this point in time is enslaved. And what we're going to wind up seeing is that these slaves will wind up fighting on both the British and the Continental Army's side. And for slaves during this time, for them, the war could be summed up in two words: danger and opportunity. All right. Danger, obviously, the fact that regardless of what side they're fighting on, there's a very good chance of going to battle and being wounded or injured or even killed, but more so opportunity. Many of these Africans were trying to figure out what side would give them the best opportunity for freedom. Would it be the group of people who are fighting to support an idea of all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or should I fight on the side of the British, okay, who, are the ones that brought slavery over here? All right. Or should I fight on the side where, my slave owner supports the Continental Army? So maybe I should flip sides. So there's no cut and dry scenario here. And what wound up happening at the beginning of the war, when the Continental Army was forged in 1775, was that General Washington refused or did not allow African Americans to enlist. All right. And the reason for it was because he did not want Southerners in the Continental Army to have to. He didn't want to have to get in between Southerners in the Army who were looked at Africans as inferior. Okay, he felt as though that the mindset of the revolution, we need to deal with everything on the table of fighting the British, and fighting internally would not work. However, what the British are going to do in 1776, as I believe we saw in one of those videos of the revolution, was that the British are basically going to come out and say any slave who successfully escapes their plantation and fights for the British, after the war, they'll be given their freedom. So thousands of slaves I should say hundreds rather, hundreds of slaves will wind up escaping off of their plantations and going to fight on the side of the British. All right. However, some will fight on the side of the Americans. Washington has to change his view on that, knowing that was called Lord Dunmore's proclamation. Okay, Lord Dunmore. And Washington changes his view and says, listen, I'm open to the idea of having, whether it be simply African-American regiments, like one of them you'll read about today from Rhode Island, or integrating them into the Army. And a lot of times, Southerners or even Northerners who had slaves, instead of enlisting themselves in the Army, would say, you know what, I'm not going to fight, but, okay, I'm going to give the Army my slave, all right, and they'll fight in my place or in my stead here. Okay, so many of those who fought on the side of the Continental Army believe that after the war, there's a good chance that they would be given their freedom. And in some cases, they are given their freedom, but in some cases, they're not. They're sent back to the plantations where they came from. From what we know, about 5,000 soldiers wound up African Americans enlisting in the Continental Army and fighting on the side of the Continental Army as well as the Navy. Okay, as well as the Navy, in a very small Navy, but over 5,000 men of African descent will support the war effort. So, what I'm going to, or what I left for you today, is a short reading sample of some examples of men who fought in the war. Okay, and a brief question in regards to kind of your feelings on some of these heroes who probably a lot of you may have never even heard before. We all know Washington and Nathaniel Greene and Benedict Arnold and John Paul Jones probably, but some of the names that you'll see there today you may not hear. So we'll kind of pick up with this on Thursday because it is important, and then we'll wrap up with section 3. So at this point in time, if you've watched this in class, please work on your worksheets. If you're watching this at home, then just simply, if you did your worksheets in class, don't worry about it. But I just wanted to make sure that you were filling in the notes. All right, quiz on Monday. If you guys have any questions, make sure you let me know. And obviously, assignment 5.3 is also due tomorrow as well. So plenty of time in class to get these things done. All right, take care, everybody, and see you tomorrow.